It may look sunny in California, but there are stormy days ahead.
If we do not pass this budget and this tax increase today, the California dream will turn into the California nightmare.
California is by far the worst, but 46 states face serious budget shortfalls. Here in California, taking the federal money is the one thing the Republican governor and almost every other politician can agree on. Bill Whitaker, CBS News, Los Angeles.
I'll be right there. I just got to get this thing out of here. We got to be downstairs in about 10 minutes.
She said, don't fall.
I think we're ready to go.
What they went through,
I'll meet you down there. I'll see you down at the bus. Hey Joe, how you doing? I think we're almost ready to go. What, in about a minute or so? Marcus has to grab the camera.
Ended up in the second career, and that was as an art director in Manhattan for a big ad agency, believe it or not. And so I had moved back there, but I never lost my love for this place.
This film is called Inspired by California. It's about my journey to explore what the press has declared the end of the California dream. The end of the dream that I grew up hearing about as a child in New York City. I was stationed in Southern California in the military in the 1970s, which really began my desire to want to live here. I spent 20 years trying to move back to California from the East Coast. I finally moved to the Bay Area in the year 2000. By the time I got here, the public mudslinging of California was in full swing, criticizing everything from California's lack of energy, the failing school system, the economy, immigration reform, to the declining population. I had just arrived and the place seemed to be falling apart, or at least that's what the media was saying. What happened to the Golden State, this land of opportunity that I'd spent my youth watching on TV and reading about in magazines? That's me in 1960 in New York City with my sister and my brother. By 2010, I was a little concerned. Had I made a mistake? Was California really a failed state, as the papers were declaring? Or was there something to salvage of the California dream? I spent the early part of 2010 planning a trip around the state to find out for myself. In May of 2010, I hopped in a bus with filmmaker Mark Half Moon, painted by 6 emerging Santa Cruz artists who had created prints of their California inspirations to help support the journey, and set on a trip around the state to ask people what, if anything, inspired them about California. The trip was planned to be 3 months long, but ended up taking almost a year. with 6 different camera people interviewing hundreds of people from every walk of life and every corner of the state. This is a story about my journey and what I found out.
I'm a laid-off employee from the Department of Corrections. The only thing I don't love about California is our job situation right now. Our beloved governor.
Incarceration rate on this street alone is pretty high, and yet it's a street with virtually no crime at all.
I'm very mad at California right now, though, because it has the worst education system in the country. We have the worst education system in the country, and since I'm on the school board and I'm working with education, I'm having to cut education for children every few months. It's very hard for me.
Everything in these times of war and oil spills and all kinds of crazy stuff going on.
Don't like the taxes and all that.
It's become a very expensive place to live. It's the only people who are moving here now are those that can afford to buy their $300,000, $400,000 homes, and they don't seem to take part in the actions of the town as much as they might have, and as far as I'm concerned, as much as they should have.
Although we spoke with people who expressed frustration with some of the challenges facing the state, I was determined to find out from people living here what, if anything, inspired them about California. Was there anything left of the California dream? We continued driving down the coast, stopping in community after community, meeting people and hearing their California stories. I was always calling ahead to the next stop and to the next group of people. Everywhere we went, people seemed really eager to share their stories. I felt that we were making progress. The people we were meeting shared personal stories with us about their involvement in their communities and their reasons for staying here, and that despite the fact that there were problems, felt optimistic about California. I was impressed by the willingness of so many strangers to open up their homes and their lives to us. I didn't know if this was just a casual California friendliness or something deeper, one of the many things I was curious to find out on this journey. Day after day, we just kept driving, from place to place, from town to town. The Dude, as we had named the bus after the Jeff Bridges character in The Big Lebowski, took us everywhere we needed to go. We made a side trip up Route 46 to see the site where James Dean tragically died, ironically just 4 days before I was born. Mark drove, while I called the towns ahead to schedule interviews. Down the road in San Diego, we were lucky enough to meet Ingrid Croce, owner of Croce's Restaurant and wife of the late Jim Croce. Now remarried, I wasn't expecting Ingrid to talk about Jim Croce, but it was a story she clearly wanted to share with us.
It was funny, Jim's parents never wanted him to be a musician, so they gave him $500 to make an album, which back then was pretty funny. That was a lot of money back then, and they gave him $500 to go into the studio and make an album, and it was called Facets, and he played a lot of people's music, a couple of his own songs, and they thought it would discourage him from ever wanting to make an album.
In Morro Bay, I caught up with a busy harbor director, Rick Halbert, a third-generation Californian who talked about some of the dangers of the fishing industry.
Probably about 18 years ago, a good friend of our chief harbor patrol officers at the time, a big guy named Dick Ennis, that would have this little dog that he would take everywhere with him, had a albacore boat, and he would go off on the mid-Pacific fishery. It was about a 20-day trip to get out to mid-Pacific to fish for albacore. Dick came in one day to say goodbye to Dick Ennis came in to say goodbye to Dick Rogers, and they had a great talk, and about 6 days later we got a call that the boat had turned over and they'd never found Dick. And
We met Domingo, a retired farm worker, sitting on a bench in San Juan Bautista.
I worked all my life in the field. It's hard work. It's not easy. And then I went to work in the paper mill, cutting paper, and that's harder yet. Tomatoes. I lived in Montview. We used to thin sugar beets, pick potatoes and everything around there. Beans, string beans, tomatoes.
We met the artist Sofania in the hills of Big Sur, who showed us around her beautiful wooded campus.
And we have gatherings here on the solstices and equinoxes so that we can celebrate the fact that we are nature, being in nature and celebrating the change of the seasons. And we, have music and art, and we do that through self-expression, painting, sculpture, poetry, dance, all kinds of music. So it's been really having my dreams come true here, which is to be surrounded by nature and people who either are, want to share their creative gifts or who are appreciative of creative gifts.
Just outside of Los Angeles, we spent time in Laguna Beach, a creative coastal community where the arts thrive. That's where we met Lisa Mansour, an arts commissioner for Laguna Beach.
The Percent for Art program, they had to... I'm an arts commissioner in Laguna, and we do all sorts of things. As well as the public art, we do murals and sculptures and performing arts. We do music in the park and serenades at the beach.
Because we were on an incredibly small budget, our criteria for lodging was cost first and internet access second, since part of the project included uploading interviews to the Inspired by California website every day. Consequently, we stayed in some of the worst motels in California. One of the motels had 18 signs promoting internet access, which of course didn't work, and the person they put in charge of the router was an out-of-town guest who'd been at the motel for 2 weeks. Now that's outsourcing. We spent 6 days in Los Angeles, which allowed us to film a broad spectrum of people and terrain. It also allowed Mark time to catch up with some old friends, one of whom we interviewed was Mark's friend Bruce Whiteman.
It's this job that brought me to California in the first place in 1996, and I've been here ever since, running the library. And I came here from Canada, from Montreal actually, and so in some ways what inspires me about California is very much tied to, I guess what you could see is kind of being in exile, and yet it feels in some ways like I'm in exile in the Garden of Eden. So it's this funny kind of dual relationship that I have with California.
Outside of Los Angeles and Sherman Oaks, we met Billy DeMotta, who told us about his journey from singer to casting director for some of Hollywood's blockbuster films.
Because I love movies and I love people, and you put them together, how more inspiring a job can you have if you're a big people person and you're a big movie person? So I said, I want to do what you do. And she said, okay, come and work for me for free. So I did. I wound up working with her for 2.5 years. After the first 6 months, she started paying me, and I started working on great big movies, studio movies. The Predator, Running Man, Commando, Three Amigos, 16 Candles, tons and tons of stuff that she was working on that I got to be a part of as an assistant.
Whenever possible, we'd find local campgrounds, which allowed us to unwind and get a break from those damn cheap motels we had spent way too much time in. The campgrounds were plentiful and affordable, and allowed us to meet people who shared their California stories. We had equipped the dude with everything we needed to live out of the bus for extended periods of time. We reached the border of Mexico 3.5 weeks after leaving Santa Cruz. We'd already met a lot of people along the coast and were now about to head eastward into the desert, a more uncharted territory for us. The unusually cool summer along the coast was creating record heat inland. In Borrego Springs, about 35 miles west of Salton Sea, we met Jackie Foreman, who had moved a year earlier from Alaska to pursue a career as a singer.
I am originally from Juneau, Alaska, and I spent 6 years in northern Arizona around Flagstaff before moving to Borrego Springs, which I am here right now today, sitting by the pool at the lovely springs of Borrego. I moved here a little over a year ago, and I am pursuing my dream of being a singer-songwriter musician, and I came to California because that's where my dream led me a year ago.
We were over 4 weeks into our trip and beginning to understand more about California and its people. Wait a minute, dude, there's a beverage here. The California dream I was in search of was different than what I initially thought. The people we had met were actively engaged in their towns, their communities, and found opportunities in each of those places. The dream, it seemed, is the strong sense of identity with this place that everyone shared, and their connection to the land itself. The temperatures were soaring and the coast was far behind us. We were feeling good about the people we had met up to this point, and we're looking forward to the eastern Sierras that lay ahead of us. We decided to take the journey through Joshua Tree National Park on our way north to Route 395. It took us several hours to wind our way through the park's 2-lane highway.
But all of my hope is never lost.
And that's when it happened. Our transmission failed just outside of the park. The long stay in the desert had gotten the better part of our aging transmission. We pulled over in front of this sign. That's when we met Hector.
This is what I'm talking about. This is what updates them right here. Also,
That's aluminum.
This is aluminum, yeah. Now, this isn't only what we replaced all the steel, all the frictions, everything. This is just the basic stuff I'm showing you right here, okay?
We were now stuck in Joshua Tree, just outside 29 Palms. We didn't have the $1,500 to fix the transmission that now sat in Hector's driveway. I called everyone I knew in Santa Cruz to help us financially. I even contacted the mayors of Joshua Tree and 29 Palms to see if there was any local help available. No such luck. And then Mr. SH, as I call him, came through and put the transmission on his credit card. Hector was now rushing to fix our transmission as we spent 5 days in this Motel 6 with daily temperatures around 125.
All these springs in the whole body.
Hector and his father fixed our transmission in record time.
This part of the gasket.
That's just part of the deal, gaskets. I mean, it had a lot more gaskets than that. This is just basic stuff we're showing.
Los internos sellos.
All your seals, all your internal seals, all your lip seals and all that's been replaced.
Hector joined us for a test run and we were back on the road, headed towards Route 395 in the eastern Sierras. We were thankful to have the dude back and had to make up for lost time. Some interviews I had scheduled had to be canceled. But there were still people up ahead waiting for us and anxious to tell us their California stories. At the beginning of the July 4th weekend, we arrived in Lone Pine at the base of Mount Whitney, 300 miles north of Joshua Tree. Just after crossing the town line, our transmission failed again. This time it was an electronic sensor that controlled the transmission, a separate problem from the transmission. We called Hector and the local auto repair shops, but there was nothing anyone can do until after July 4th. So we pulled into the nearest campground and set up tents. For the last week, other than the last 300 miles, the only transportation we had was my bike. It was ironic that we broke down in Lone Pine, since my Aunt Alix, who had moved from Paris to New York and finally to Lone Pine, where she spent 35 years, had always wanted to take a trip with me here, but unfortunately passed away before we could go together. Now here I was in Lone Pine, a town I'd heard about for years, with my film colleague Mark, a broken dude, and my bike, which had a melted front tire from the second day riding in the desert. Hector and his family were going to make the 300-mile trip north on July 5th to get us back on the road. In the meantime, on July 4th, we hitched a ride 15 miles north to the town of Independence, population 548. And it looked like every one of the 548 people from Independence was here at the barbecue to celebrate Independence Day and find out what some of the locals thought about California.
Well, Independence is a little town of about 550 people, but it's the county seat, which means it's the head of the county that has only 20,000 people. So we have the second largest county in the state, only to San Bernardino County, with a population of under 20,000 people. And here we are with our little town that's kept going all these years.
It was almost surreal. Here we were in Independence, California, on Independence Day, while our only transportation out of the mountains was broken down 15 miles south of here.
This is the Independence Heli-TAC crew, our helicopter. This is a 525 is our call sign. Here in Independence, California on the 4th of July. A little celebration time. There's some folks coming around on tours and stuff now, and we're trying to orientate and educate folks.
On July 5th, Hector and his family drove 300 miles north, the farthest north from Joshua Tree they had ever been, to fix our sensor. We were incredibly grateful and at last back on the road with the dude. We had been on the road for over 2 months, and while driving through Yosemite, some pressing issues at home required that Mark return to Santa Cruz earlier than expected. So we crossed the Central Valley back to the coast. Another setback in a series of setbacks. A year in the planning, and all it took was 3 weeks in the desert to derail my Inspired by California project. I was starting to believe that this journey was over. I was back in Santa Cruz and feeling concerned. I was running out of money, the dude was decommissioned, and I was back home a month earlier than expected. The many weeks in the desert had really taken a toll on me and Mark. I still had many people in the northern part of the state that wanted to tell their California story and wanting to know when I would arrive. As I prepared for this next chapter, I reflected on all the people we had met and the stories they had shared. Despite the state's challenges, all these people were optimistic about the future of California. And I was optimistic knowing that they were out there every day working to make their communities a better place for themselves and those around them. I knew this was the beginning of a much better California dream than the one I grew up knowing as a child. Even some people who had expressed dissatisfaction with California were optimistic.
I'm from California. Actually, I was born in an airplane leaving Arkansas. I was born over Los Angeles International Airport. Things I do love about California, of course, the gorgeous women we have. Mine is over there. This weather, we have perfect weather. We have beautiful places to fish.
I love Watsonville, where I lived. It's a really wonderful, very working class community. I love California. I'm mad at California, though.
I live in California now. I love God's country. It's beautiful.
I started to make calls to people who might be interested in continuing the journey north. Luckily, local filmmaker Peter McGettigan decided to join me for the next leg north, up the coast. Peter's a fifth-generation Californian and a direct descendant of General Vallejo. Before we headed north, I spoke with several people from Santa Cruz about California.
There's a sense of like life is worth living to be enjoyed, not just to like make more money or get to the top of some pile or something. And that's what inspires me about California. And then if that's true about California, that's true about Santa Cruz in spades.
I like the people and open hearts, the freedom you find in this place, and multiple opportunities and diversity.
There's something coming out of the earth, literally.
You know, diversity of the people and the cultures. I've grown up in Santa Cruz and Oakland most of my life and seen a lot of people both ethnically and just mentally, you know, a lot of styles, so I appreciate that.
After a few days in Santa Cruz, I was back on the road again, headed north up the coast, looking forward to a new group of people and a new set of California stories. In Mendocino, I was lucky enough to talk with Cammie King-Conlon, who as a child star played the role of Bonnie Blue Butler, daughter of Clark Gable and Vivien Leigh in Gone with the Wind. Little did I know at that time that a month later she would pass away.
And in 1939, I played the role of Bonnie Blue Butler in Gone with the Wind. That's a long time ago. Amazingly enough, it's something that keeps arising because the movie is such a phenomenon, such an icon. It's interesting. I'm lucky enough to be up in Mendocino now, actually Little River on the Mendocino coast. A far cry from Hollywood, but a lovely one, and the site of a lot of movies. California is open, the weather is usually lovely. I mean, I wouldn't exist on the East Coast. I couldn't take those winters. What inspires me? Oh, I'm trying to think. East of Eden, the author, Senior Moments. Steinbeck. Every time I drive through the Central Valley, I have some friends down down around San Luis Obispo, Salinas. I mean, each part of the state. I'm up in, let's say, the North Coast, and there's.
It was great to speak with Cammie, and it was interesting that after growing up in Los Angeles after 40 years, she relocated to Mendocino and started a new life. And was completely engaged in that community, working as the PR director for the Little River Inn. Cammie was right about it being about every part of the state. California is really like a group of small countries working together under the umbrella of one big state. But as big and diverse as the state is, the people seem to come together on a lot of common ground. Everywhere I went on my journey, there was a true California experience to be had. In Sonoma, I got to visit the home of the birth of the California Republic. In Anza Borrego, I got to see one of the largest active fault lines in the state, on the day of the lunar eclipse in one of the darkest night spots in the state. In Mendocino, I get to stay in the room that James Dean stayed in while filming East of Eden. In Yreka, I get to see the largest remaining gold deposit still remaining from the gold rush. In Bodega Bay, we stopped for breakfast on the steps of the schoolhouse where Alfred Hitchcock shot his 1963 film, The Birds, and on it went. We stopped in Whiskeytown, just outside of Redding, to film the Whiskeytown National Recreation Area. Whiskeytown Lake was formed as part of the Central Valley Water Project, with the construction of the Whiskeytown Dam, providing water for agriculture, and was dedicated by President John F. Kennedy in 1963, a month before he was assassinated.
We witness today the completion of a project which symbolizes the goals to which we're committed. The Whiskeytown Reservoir is not the largest structure on the Trinity River, but its completion is significant because this is the last of the Trinity Project dams. When the Trinity Division completed and the upper reaches of the Sacramento now harnessed, Shasta County and its neighbors are assured of water and power.
Whiskeytown is one of only fewer than 30 national parks, recreation areas, or historic monuments that has an ongoing artist in residence program. Here at Whiskeytown we have a designated cabin where we invite artists to come out and stay for a period of time, whether it be a week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, have their work inspired by the park, by nature, by the Whiskeytown experience.
I like the fact that California is sort of like where the rest of the country drifts to. I like the wide mix and wide variety of the people, and I like that all the freaks seem to funnel their way down here to the West Coast. And in with that too, I like the variety of the state itself, you know, physically, geographically. We have just about everything from, you know, oceans to deserts here, and I love that.
About 30 miles north of Mendocino, along the dramatic coastline of Fort Bragg, we visited with Sally Otson, owner of the Pacific Star Winery.
People are starting to recognize that we're losing old grape varieties and beginning to replant. I think we have 84 acres now in the world of Charbonneau. Yeah. I think, what is an inspiration in California? The wildness inspires me. I keep this place just a little bit funky for a reason, because I think people are very comfortable around wine in this setting. The industry has become just a little pretentious, and I try to promote wine drinking without agonizing over it. You know, just wine as a friendly element of food beverage, simply a food beverage. And I think that we've achieved that here over 21 years because I have loyal customers, and I'm very grateful for that.
In Redding, I cycled along the many miles of pathways along the Sacramento River. I spent a lot of time observing the Sundial Bridge. The Sundial Bridge is a cantilever bridge that spans the Sacramento River. It was designed by the Spanish architect Santiago Calatrava. What was interesting in observing the bridge throughout the day is it did what a bridge should do, bring the community together from both sides of the river. The bridge was built in 2004 to mixed reviews from the local population. But whatever the opinions may be, it was clear from my observation that something really special had been created. We visited the Abbey of New Clairvaux in Vina. It's the first Cistercian monastery in the Americas to grow, vinify, and bottle its own wine. These traditions date back to the 12th century. At the Abbey, the monks were hard at work on the Sacred Stones Project, which is the reconstruction of an 800-year-old chapter house from a monastery in Olivia, Spain. These stones took 80 years to transport here. Wairika was the northernmost part of this trip. We were lucky enough to meet Ed Steele, who took us up in his balloon to see from the air the border between Oregon and California and all the Jeffersonians below. At 5 a.m. we set up the balloon and were aloft by 6 a.m. On this picture-perfect morning, we had Mount Shasta as our backdrop, and the road ahead laid out below.
It smiles from the joy of the sun up above.
Seeing this place from above provided me with a certain kind of perspective and clarity. After meeting so many incredible people and traveling to amazing places throughout the state, it was no wonder so many people have wanted to make their home here. In the early 1850s, over 300,000 people came to California in search of gold and a new way of life. Some of the settlers coming from the east were so desperate to move here, they lowered their families, horses, wagons, 2,000 feet over sheer cliffs in places like Emigrant Pass. I wonder if anyone would do that today. It seems to me that we're being outfoxed by organizations such as Fox News that sell fear and negativity in the hopes that we'll be guided by their instructions. The people I had met along the journey were aware of the problems California faces, but were working hard every day to make their part of California a better place. I felt that the questions I'd asked myself a year earlier about the end of the California dream were being answered.
The natural environment itself is really inspiring, but there's also a legacy of California that, from a human perspective, is also very inspiring. To me, it represents the dream of just the dream of a better life.
Well, California has something for absolutely everybody, I think. I mean, no matter where you go, you can find something to do and something you love. I particularly love the North Coast. Mostly, well, the view is obvious. I mean, you can't really not love the view. But also the people. Mendocino in particular, you get to be whoever you want to be and anything goes here.
And there's a lot of kindred spirits here. I mean, people really pretty much tolerate people's differences and just let people be.
You can do anything that your heart desires in 4 hours in any direction.
I love California, 'cause that's the way I feel.
Interestingly, East of Eden is in a certain way why I came here. Now, I grew up in the Midwest and I had never been west of Des Moines, but I was in the Navy in 1957 and I saw East of Eden on the fantail of a naval destroyer in the Caribbean. And I was just intrigued with the town. I mean, James Dean was okay. I like Julie Harris even more, actually. But I was intrigued with the town. And then when I came west in 1964, I went to San Francisco, but then I thought, all right, I'm going to go find Monterey. Well, I went to Monterey, and they didn't make the film here.
Yeah, I think what inspires me about California is the diversity of the state.
We can all get along and figure it out, so that's what I like.
And I think the dream is still in California.
Surrounded by the big picture, what happened to today? After everything plays out, darling, what are you left with to say? Locked and chained as your silhouette, asked to never speak and to never fret.
After thousands of miles, my journey came to an end in Paradise. It ended on Inspiration Lane in Paradise, California, at the home of Cliff Jacobson and Melissa Schuster, 20 miles east of Chico.
Melissa Schuster. We're at Chapelle du l'Artiste on Inspiration Lane in Paradise, California, and I am the proprietor of this place.
My name is Cliff Jacobson, and I'm her helper.
We spent 3 days in Paradise and had a chance to talk with Cliff and Melissa about a wide variety of subjects regarding the state of California. They were both optimistic about the state's future and were actively involved in their community, politically, civically, and economically. It was time for me to get back to tell the story of the California dream I had found after all these years.
In the history of the region itself, from the logging industry, the gold industry, Paradise, of course, is the home of the largest gold nugget ever discovered at 54 pounds. But the surrounding areas, Oroville, with the story of Ishi and Chico and the Bidwells in Bidwell Park, and the whole region has an awful lot to offer people. And it's right here. It's part of that California thing. There's so much here. It's just amazing.
Hi, Maggie.
Did we lose sound?
We're good.
This is going to be going to California.
I had been on the road for over 6 months. I had traveled through most of the state and met hundreds of people, and realized that the doom and gloom story that the media portrays is only a little bit true. It's the people that will eventually decide the fate of this state, through their actions, their joys, their passions, and their commitment to the places they have chosen to call home here in California. It was time for me to go home and learn from the people that I had met and apply the same lessons of commitment and ownership, making this a better place to live. Back home to the place I have called home for 8 years, Santa Cruz.
Someone told me there's a girl out there with love in her eyes and flowers in her hair. I didn't see too many this time.
Don't even mention it.
One more time.
Chances on a big jet plane. Never let them tell you that we all are the same. Oh, the sea was red and the sky was gray. I wondered how tomorrow could ever follow today. Mountains in the canyon start to tremble and shake. The children of the sun began